Android 1.0. This is where Android started, and it was not pretty. Back in 2008, Google launched the very first version of Android on a phone called the HTC Dream. And when people turned it on for the first time, the experience was rough. There was no app store with real apps. You could not copy and paste text. Background apps would silently drain your battery completely overnight, and you would have no idea why. The browser crashed constantly, and the whole phone felt unfinished, like something that should have stayed in a lab for 6 more months before reaching real people. The reason this happened is simple. Apple had just launched the iPhone in 2007, and Google panicked. They needed something out fast. So Android 1 shipped before it was truly ready, just to have something on shelves. But here's the thing, without this messy, broken first version, nothing that came after it would exist. Every great Android phone you have ever used started here, with this. Android 3.0 Honeycomb. Most people have never even heard of this one, and the ones who have wished they had not. In 2011, Google decided to make a version of Android specifically for tablets. They called it Honeycomb, and when they showed it off, it looked incredible. The whole interface had this dark, futuristic, sci-fi feel, like something out of a Hollywood movie. People were genuinely excited. Then, it actually came out, and everything fell apart. The apps crashed constantly. The performance was laggy even on brand new hardware. Basic things just did not work properly, and Google made it even worse by locking the source code, which was a huge deal, because Android had always been open for anyone to use and modify. Now suddenly, it was not. The tablets that ran Honeycomb sold terribly. Manufacturers started quietly delaying their own tablet plans, because nobody wanted to ship a product with this software on it. And Google? They never officially said Honeycomb was dead. They just stopped talking about it one day, and moved on. Within a year it was completely gone, replaced by something better. It remains the most forgotten and most embarrassing chapter in Android history. Android 5.0 Lollipop. This one is the most painful on this list, because it genuinely had everything going for it. When Google announced Lollipop in 2014, Android fans were thrilled. It brought a completely new visual design, called Material Design, bright colors, smooth animations, clean layouts. It looked modern and polished in a way Android never had before. Everyone was excited to update, and then the update arrived, and phones started falling apart. The biggest problem was a memory leak. Every single time you turned your screen off, the phone loaded a small animation into memory and then never cleared it. So every time you locked and unlocked your phone, your memory filled up a little more. After a few days, your phone would be running out of RAM completely. Apps crashed. The home screen kept reloading itself. Everything slowed down to a crawl. On top of that, battery life collapsed on millions of devices after updating. Turning on Wi-Fi alone was enough to start draining the battery at an alarming rate. People who had perfectly fine phones before the update suddenly had devices that died by midday. Google eventually fixed it in later updates. But for the people who updated early, those first few months were genuinely miserable. Android 6.0 Marshmallow. This one did not fail dramatically. It failed quietly, and that almost made it worse. Marshmallow launched in 2015, and on paper, it looked solid. Google introduced a new permission system where apps had to ask for your approval before accessing your camera, location, or contacts. That was a genuinely good idea. They also added a battery-saving mode called Doze that helped phones last longer when sitting idle. The problem was that almost nobody got it. Android updates have always depended on phone manufacturers pushing them out to their devices, and most manufacturers simply did not bother with Marshmallow. Budget phones never received it. Mid-range phones waited 6 to 12 months. By the time Marshmallow reached most users, Android 7.0 was already being announced. At its peak, only around 1 in 3 Android devices were actually running Marshmallow. The rest were stuck on older versions, with none of the improvements. It was a version that worked well, but reached too few people to matter, and that fragmentation problem was entirely Google's failure to solve. Android 12. This is the most recent failure on this list, and it affected more people than any of the others. Android 12 launched in late 2021 with the biggest visual redesign Android had seen in years. Google called it Material You, and the idea was that your phone's colors and interface would change automatically to match your wallpaper. It looked genuinely impressive in demos, but the launch was a disaster. Samsung paused its Android 12 update rollout because devices were breaking. OnePlus did the same. Pixel 6 owners, the people using Google's own phones, were reporting dozens of bugs. Then Google pushed a fix update in December that made the network connection on Pixel 6 phones even worse. Google pulled that update entirely, which almost never happens. Phones in South Korea were getting bricked completely unusable after installing the update. The core problem was that Google was trying to do too much at once. A full visual redesign, a new design system, a brand new chip in the Pixel 6, and a rushed release schedule all collided at the same time. The result was one of the most chaotic Android launches in years. It stabilized eventually, but the damage to trust, especially for Pixel 6 owners, took a long time to recover from. Android 14. Nobody talks about this one as a failure, but ask anyone who owned a budget phone in late 2023, and they will tell you a different story. Android 14 launched in October 2023, and on flagship phones, it worked fine. Good performance, solid features, no major drama. But on certain Samsung budget devices, specifically some Galaxy A series phones with 8 GB of storage, the update caused something almost unbelievable. The phones stopped working. Internal storage became completely inaccessible after the update. Users could not open apps. They could not access their photos. Some people lost data they had no backup of. Samsung acknowledged the issue and eventually pushed a fix, but for the people affected, the damage was already done. What made this worse is that budget phone users are exactly the people who cannot afford to just buy a new device when something goes wrong. These were not tech enthusiasts with backups and spare phones. These were everyday people who trusted an update notification and paid the price for it. It was a small failure in scale, but a significant one in impact, and a reminder that a bad update does not need to affect millions of people to genuinely ruin someone's day. Every one of these versions failed for a different reason. Android 1.0 shipped too early. Honeycomb launched on the wrong hardware at the wrong time. Lollipop broke what it was trying to improve. Marshmallow worked, but never reached enough people. Android 12 tried to do everything at once. Android 14 forgot about the people at the bottom of the market. But every single failure taught Google something. And the Android running on your phone today, stable, smooth, and regularly updated, exists because Google had to learn these lessons the hard way.